This week, the sun hurls a plasma bullet at Earth. Will our phones and power grids survive? In Singapore, America's new defense chief warns China could strike Taiwan imminently. Is that sober analysis or hype? In Gaza, one tweak to a ceasefire plan may decide life or death. What exactly did Hamas demand? UN inspectors uncover uranium for 9 bombs in Iran. How close is a nuclear showdown? And Sudan's overlooked war now carries a $1 trillion repair bill. Who pays, and how soon? This is Nexus Feed Weekly Top 5 Global News Roundup. Your lens into the world as it really is, and where it might be headed. Stay with us. Every answer is just ahead. We start 150 million kilometers away, on the surface of the sun. Late on 30 May, an enormous coronal mass ejection erupted from active region 3697, hurling billions of tons of plasma straight at our planet. In response, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration escalated its watch to G4 severe, the second highest level on the space weather scale, for the UTC days of 1 and 2 June. Forecast models predict the shock front will slam into Earth's magnetic field late Sunday, triggering auroras that may spill as far south as Colorado, France, and northern Japan. Utilities are bracing for geomagnetically induced currents that can fry transformers. Satellite operators have begun placing craft in safe mode to ride out the storm. The last comparable G4 event, back in March, disrupted high-frequency radio for hours and forced airlines to reroute polar flights. If tonight's impact reaches the higher end of predictions, we could see GPS errors, patchy mobile networks, and dazzling curtains of color well into Tuesday. From space weather to traditional geopolitics, we pivot now to Singapore, where the annual Shangri-La dialogue gathered defense chiefs and strategists from around the Indo-Pacific. In his debut appearance, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth delivered a blunt warning. Beijing's ambition to seize Taiwan by force, he said, could be imminent and would spark devastating consequences for the world. He urged Asian allies to raise military spending toward NATO's 2% of GDP benchmark, arguing that credible deterrence is the best way to keep the peace. The speech electrified the ballroom. Some delegates applauded the plain talk while others worried it might box China into a corner. Hegseth's rhetoric marked a clear break from the more restrained tones of his predecessors and underscored Washington's shift from counterterrorism to great power competition as its organizing defense principle. China's delegation bristled, accusing Washington of a Cold War mentality and warning that any attempt to contain Beijing would fail. Yet behind the sharp words, a quieter reality took hold. Several Southeast Asian ministers privately conceded that their own coast guards, cyber defenses, and air forces remain under-resourced. Tokyo, Canberra, and Seoul signaled support for Hegseth's call. Manila, locked in daily cat-and-mouse games with Chinese vessels around 2nd Thomas Shoal, said it would submit a supplemental defense budget next month. Analysts noted that the Indo-Pacific is drifting toward 2 parallel blocks, one centered on the US-led security architecture, the other on China's vast economic network. Whether Hegseth's hardline accelerates that sorting remains to be seen, but the temperature in the Straits of Malacca felt noticeably hotter by week's end. That brings us west to the Middle East, where prospects for a much-needed ceasefire in Gaza again flickered, then dimmed. On 31st May, Hamas handed mediators its formal response to the US-brokered proposal tabled earlier this month. The group accepted the broad 3-phase outline but demanded key amendments: an explicit Israeli withdrawal from the Strip, a permanent end to hostilities, and the release of 1,100 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for 10 living hostages and 18 bodies. U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff immediately called the counteroffer totally unacceptable, saying it amounted to renegotiating settled points and warning that time for diplomacy was rapidly running out. Israel, which had signaled conditional acceptance of the original plan, said Hamas's document proves the group has no intention of compromise. On the ground, the humanitarian toll continued to mount. UN agencies say more than 54,000 Palestinians have been killed since the conflict reignited in October 2023, with famine-like conditions now reported in northern Gaza. Aid convoys were halted twice this week after armed looters hijacked trucks, underscoring the breakdown of law and order. Inside Israel, a separate pressure campaign is building. Families of remaining hostages blocked highways in Tel Aviv, demanding the government bring everyone home, whatever it takes. The international community is thus caught between averting a larger humanitarian collapse and preventing a ceasefire that could cement Hamas's rule. As one seasoned diplomat told reporters, "We're seesawing between the unacceptable and the impossible, and people are dying in the gap." While Gaza negotiations stall, another nuclear flashpoint is coming back into sharp relief. A confidential International Atomic Energy Agency report, circulated to board members on 31st of May, accuses Iran of carrying out undeclared nuclear activities at 3 sites during the early 2000s. Inspectors say environmental swipes picked up enriched uranium particles that, if fully processed, would be enough for roughly 9 nuclear weapons. The report stopped short of claiming Tehran is currently weaponizing its program, but Western diplomats are already drafting a resolution that would declare Iran in violation of its safeguards obligations and refer the matter to the UN Security Council. Such a move would surely provoke a harsh response from Tehran, which insists the traces stem from decades-old contamination. The findings also threaten to derail the quiet back-channel talks Washington has pursued since the 2024 U.S. election, aimed at rolling back Iran's stockpile in exchange for partial sanctions relief. European officials fear this could ignite yet another cycle of escalation. Iran might disable surveillance cameras, ramp up enrichment to 90% purity, or restrict site access entirely, while the U.S. Congress, already skeptical of diplomacy, could push for fresh sanctions. Meanwhile, Israel's war cabinet, distracted but far from idle, views any further Iranian non-compliance as proof that time for negotiations is over. With both Gaza and the nuclear file teetering, the region risks sliding into a wider confrontation in the very same week diplomats were hoping to wind tensions down. Finally, we turn south to Sudan, where a 2-year civil war between the regular army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces has hollowed out one of Africa's largest countries. A new United Nations-backed assessment released on 28 May puts the cost of rebuilding shattered infrastructure at a staggering $1 trillion, 300 billion for Khartoum alone, and 700 billion for the rest of the country. The figure covers power plants, roads, schools and hospitals, but does not include the economic losses from 2 years of shuttered businesses and displaced labor. More than 13 million people, roughly 1/4 of the population, are now living outside their homes, many in cramped camps where cholera and measles spread unchecked. Humanitarian agencies warn the crisis has eclipsed even Yemen in scale, yet it draws only a fraction of global attention and funding. Aid convoys risk bandit attacks, while visas for international staff can take months. Sudanese doctors describe hospitals without oxygen, fuel, or basic antibiotics. Women walk kilometers for clean water only to find boreholes contaminated by corpses. With global donors stretched by Ukraine and Gaza, UN appeals are less than 15% funded. Analysts say that unless the warring parties accept a monitored ceasefire, or outside powers stop sending them arms, the war could burn for years, turning Sudan into a vast, ungoverned space straddling the Red Sea trade corridor. In closing, this week's stories remind us how interconnected our fates have become. A solar tempest threatens power grids precisely when war-torn regions rely on electricity for life-saving aid. Great power rivalry in Asia rearranges alliances that might one day decide the Strait of Hormuz or the Suez Canal. Ceasefire diplomacy in Gaza wobbles even as a secret Iranian program nudges the nuclear question back onto the global agenda. And in Sudan, the world's most underreported catastrophe carries a price tag that dwarfs any single donor's capacity, demanding collective action just when multilateralism feels most fragile. Whether looking to the skies or scanning the fault lines below, vigilance and cooperation remain our best shields against the shocks ahead. That's your Nexus Feed roundup of the top 5 global news items of the week. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and join us next week for another roundup of stories shaping our shared future. Until then, stay informed, stay compassionate, and most of all, stay hopeful.